Status of the RV. Of course, no one really knows except the planners in the CBI. My CBI contact tells me that there is a very strong possibility that September-December will be the phase-in of the redenomination to the newer lower denominations of the IQD. We were told that even with the electronic banking and inclusion efforts along with the digital dinar, there will be a need for hard currency on the streets, and this will not go away. The fact is there will only be one more rate change, and it will be a change in country only. Then the reinstatement, which would more than likely bring the rate up even more. Can you call this 2 rate changes? Technically yes, but let's not confuse the process. There is no guarantee the reinstatement will be different from the in-country rate, and, in fact, it could come out the same as an initial sucker rate, maybe. But what we do know for sure is there will never be 2 official rates for the dinar. The in-country rate will be the reinstatement rate also once the reinstatement occurs. Get it? Why in hell do you think they had to have the parallel market come in line with the official CBI rate? So they did this so there can be control over their own currency. There can never be 2 official rates. There have been many solutions implemented to obtain the nearly 80% of the Iraqi currency hoarded outside the banking system. Unfortunately, none of these solutions have seemed to work to the degree of the needed success. What will the CBI do now? Will a redenomination be the answer? This hoarded capital is much needed to continue the progress of the development, road and other projects in Iraq. The banks need this money to loan out. So why doesn't the CBI just print more money and solve this problem? You all should realize, by now part of the monetary reform is to shrink the monetary supply by almost 2/3. Why would the CBI print more money at this stage of the game? Instead, they told us they must shrink if back to 2003 to 2004 era levels. They must get this 80% of the cash into the banks. The CBI in the past was forced to print and issue more dinar to combat stolen funds and hoarded cash stashes. But they have moved into the next phase of financial reform, not survival. So now they must shrink it back and go back to lower denominations and coins. Remember that when you shrink the money supply, you can increase the value of the money that remains in circulation. Think about it. It's not rocket science to understand. It is right along with simple microeconomics of supply and demand. This is also why they had to curb the loosey-goosey parallel market and get it in line. Not to mention the corrupt money smuggled out of Iraq to Iran. In the past month there has been nothing but much more very good news coming from Iraq. Rafadain Bank's general manager, Ali Karim Al-Fatlawi, emphasized that signing the partnership agreement with K2 Integrity represents a qualitative shift in the bank's journey and the Iraqi financial sector. He noted that this strategic step transforms Rafadain Bank from a traditional local institution to an integrated banking platform directly aligned with international standards. So, what bank do you think is going to handle the bulk of the flow of dinars to and from Iraq in the future post-RV? There is other news too that we should be paying attention to, such as in the article titled, "From Basra to Manhattan, the full story of Iraq's money being withheld by the Federal Reserve." Will Iraq finally be able to break free from the chains of the US Treasury from under the DFI fund? I quote from the article, "Iraqi wealth is transformed into numbers in American financial books, subject to strict oversight and procedures that leave no room for maneuver. These arrangements were created in 2003, but remain in place today, even though their original justifications, on paper, have disappeared. Yes, all sanctions were lifted in 2022. And so why is this arrangement of the petrodollar still in place? This too had to change. Yet another couple articles titled, "Iraq's Oil Fortune, the 2-decade grip of a US fortress," and titled "Economist, Billions of Dollars Lost Due to US Control Over Iraq's Resources." We can clearly see that Iraq will not and cannot reinstate the dinar until the US says it can. As I have said many times too, that in the midst of all this behind-the-scenes stuff, the CBI keeps moving ahead on the path to the reinstatement through the banking reforms and aligning Iraq internationally. I know that this reinstatement will happen and has to happen. If you are holding enough dinar, you are already a millionaire only. We can't go to the bank yet. I cannot speak as loud for these other currencies such as the Vietnam Dong and other. However, I will say that it would not surprise me a bit if they did put many of them in many baskets to support each other, and this would put them on a more level playing field. As President Trump has stated many times will happen. He did not say might or may happen, he said will happen. As far as the Zimbabwe dollar goes, I am still a bit skeptical because I know in 2016 they voided out these multi-trillion notes and redenominated to the lower denominations. At that time they did start with the Zimbabwe dollar equal to the US dollar 1:1, but this quickly fell apart and did not last. Soon hyperinflation set in again. I believe it is now worth about 13 to 23 cents, but this is for the newer denominated notes, not the older pre-2016 notes, unless Zimbabwe makes the much needed other structural banking and financial reforms. This will never work for them. Anyhow, I only caution anyone who invests in these other currencies, thinking they are going to make them rich. The dollar faces global pressure and a potential decline of up to 35%. Newspaper analysis. Economist Zaki Al-Sadi asserted that the US dollar is going through a critical phase globally, even domestically. He pointed out that US President Donald Trump's recent policies, including the imposition of new taxes on China and the introduction of value-added tax, VAT, have negatively impacted the US currency. Al-Sadi explained in an interview with Jarida platform that talk about the expansion of the BRICS bloc and the accession of new countries, in addition to the complex geopolitical situation, especially the US-Israeli war on Iran, are all factors that put pressure on the dollar and weaken its global standing, with economists predicting a decline in its value of between 8% and 35%. He pointed out that the Iraqi market is also experiencing a state of confusion due to these repercussions, as any return to military escalation could lead to the targeting of some banks or the imposition of sanctions, which would limit dollar transactions and push investors to consider alternatives such as real estate or commercial assets. Al-Sadi explained that the central bank suspension of dollar sales via platforms at the official rate has contributed to a decline in demand for the currency locally, coupled with citizens' fears of a change in its value or the emergence of an alternative currency. He added, any temporary rise in the value of the dollar could occur if war breaks out again, but its impact will be temporary. Iraq's link to the dollar remains strong, as imports and state salaries are settled in this currency, meaning any fluctuation in its price will have a direct and clear impact on citizens. Iraq faces US banking guardianship. 2 crucial weeks for private banks. Al-Mustaqilla, less than 2 weeks remain for private banks in Iraq to comply with the financial reform roadmap developed by the American firm Oliver Wyman, a move described by economic circles as the last chance to save the banking system from the specter of liquidation and bankruptcy. According to informed banking sources, the Central Bank of Iraq has 2 options: forcing banks to increase their capital and merge those unable to expand their financial portfolios, liquidating violating banks, which opens the door wide to direct intervention by the US Federal Reserve to implement international standards in the Iraqi banking sector, the risk of liquidation and financial guardianship. The second scenario is viewed with great concern within Baghdad, as it effectively imposes a form of American tutelage over the Iraqi banking sector, a precedent that could threaten Baghdad's financial independence and undermine public confidence in the banking system as a whole. Experts believe that the US Federal Reserve's involvement could completely redraw the banking landscape in Iraq, from foreign exchange mechanisms to banks' ability to finance local projects.